Chapter 17, Lapse versus Relapse. "Oh, you can't help that," said the cat. "We're all mad here." Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. A lapse is an episode lasting a short period of time, usually less than a week. A relapse is a return to addictive behaviors: lying, covering up, using, scoring, thinking, feeling, and acting like an addict on drugs. You don't even have to use drugs to relapse, but if you do, you have. Hanging out with the old gang, being around drugs, hanging out at the bar, stealing from and lying to those around you, covering up bad behaviors, and abandoning your program are all relapse behaviors. Using drugs only seals the deal. Often relapse happens, or at least begins, several days or a week or more before using actually occurs. For example, Brian would stay clean every week with the exception of a single using episode of a point of heroin. A point is 1/10 of a gram, an amount so small it's almost not worth using at all. Every week he would say he lapsed, citing that it was only a single using episode and patting himself on the back for doing so much better than he was when he was using almost every day. For the first few weeks, I agreed with him. He was definitely doing much better than when he had been using 1/2 gram every day, and he deserved credit for that. But after a few consecutive weeks of these single-use episodes, I told him he was no longer lapsing, but had in fact relapsed. After a month or more, this was redefined from relapse to addictive using. It might not have been every day, and using much less was a huge improvement, but he was still caught in his addiction. Lying, stealing, cheating, conning, using. It was merely less frequent. Eventually, it had to be realized that even if he was successful in fooling himself, which I seriously doubted, his BS remorse every week was nothing more than a way to justify continued using of these smaller and less frequent amounts. His using had again stabilized to a consistent quantity and frequency, and that's addiction. It was a substantially lesser amount in frequency than before, yet it was fairly easy to conclude that even though his addiction had modified, it was once again a compulsive behavior. Using was stable and constant. Recovery was no longer progressing. Causes of a relapse. Triggers. What causes a lapse or relapse to occur? Did your dog run away? Did you have a fight with your spouse or best friend? An unpleasant exchange with your mother or father? A bad day at work? What about a good day at work? Sometimes good circumstances can give us the impulse to celebrate or to feel so secure that we're invincible, and this leads to a using episode. It is important to realize that nearly any set of circumstances can contribute to a lapse or relapse because of the fundamental core mentality of the addictive disordered mind. If I lapse or relapse, it is not truly because of some specific circumstances of an event or the astrological location of the planets, stars, or the weather. I use, lapse, or relapse because of one simple reason. I have an irrational, unreasonable, compulsive, and defective mentality toward drugs. I like them and want to do them, period. Reasons are simply tools my addictive mind will capitalize on to rationalize and justify a using behavior. The truth is, I do not need a reason, event, or circumstances to use drugs. I'm a dope fiend, and that's pathological. The exercise of examining and analyzing a using episode to discern its genesis or cause is indeed a worthwhile exercise. Through analysis, we can gain tremendous insights into our using cues, our vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and more thoroughly determine how to disempower them. The danger of the concept of a cue being responsible for a using episode is that our addict minds will support this idea, encouraging us to believe that if we can effectively avoid cues in the future, we'll be safe. I'm a dope fiend, and that's my using cue. I cannot avoid that or change it. It's here to stay. So while it may very well be beneficial to avoid specific cues, vulnerabilities, and weaknesses, this will not make me immune or exempt from relapse. Many addicts set about reducing or systematically avoiding cues, and that is good. We should avoid and reduce exposure to them. However, we must realize that we are still vulnerable to our addictive nature, regardless of specific circumstances. We must beware of this illusion that we can somehow control our impulses or reduce our compulsions to use by rearranging specific outside forces, factors, or influences. Our addictive minds distract us by this notion of finding and controlling these external cues so they can rampantly run undetected themselves. Examine your cues, vulnerabilities, and weaknesses and learn to be conscious of them. Maintain awareness of your true pathology of addiction and invest in needed energy and thought on work, focus, and maintenance of your commitment, regardless of cues. Oops, I slipped. A client begins a session with a confession. You're going to be disappointed, Scott. Why? What happened? I went out last night and I slipped. What do you mean you slipped? I was hanging out with the wrong friends and, I slipped up. Oh my, did you spill some milk or something? Did you make a mistake balancing your checkbook? Did you cut someone off in traffic? Or did you do dope? I don't allow clients to minimize their using by employing innocuous terms. For drug use, like slipping, we don't slip. We smoke crack, inject drugs into our arms, snort cocaine, swallow pills of OxyContin. We do dope. We don't slip. Using less than authentic terms allows the conscious mind to hide from the ugly truth, and only the ugly truth will set us free. If someone cheated on his or her partner and tried to minimize it as a slip, it would not get him or her forgiven. The client, yeah, I guess I just don't like to think of it like that, but you're right. Now you say it. Say it as it really is and feel the shame. Only the shame will bring you to fully realize what you're doing. Whether it is a lapse or a relapse, we cannot couch it in soft terms. We must be firm, even tough, yet nurturing at the same time. Managing a lapse. Take it in stride. If an addict has a brief occurrence and makes a quick return to his or her recovery strategies and plans, let it pass. But examine it to learn what you can. Examine it honestly and logically with little to no emotion. What were the circumstances that preceded the lapse? Who was involved? Where was the departure point? This will be explained soon. Feel the regret. Recommit and get back to the basics of your strategies, plan, or program of recovery. It's about progress, not perfection, and there will be misfortunes along the way. Remind yourself of why you made the recovery commitment to begin with, and try to refresh the positive elements of that choice and the negative ones. Both are reinforcing. Recommit, evaluate, and move on. Don't dwell or judge. Be careful and be aware that you are on the precipice of relapse. How do we react to relapse, and how should recovery supporters react? Stay calm, don't overreact. Once you've used, there's nothing you can do. Stop using right away. Call someone, get away, etc. Get clean, get rest, get some sleep, some food, watch a movie, or do something to take your mind off it. Don't analyze. One of the worst things you or supportive people can do is try to analyze the situation too soon. Trying to analyze it while you're either still high or coming down is a mistake. Wait until the next day or even two to go over it. You already feel bad and in a weakened state, so what possibly correct or insightful conclusions will you come to? What is the purpose of trying to solve what happened while you're in a weak, stressful, and somewhat intoxicated state? Recovery supporters should back off. Provide companionship if you feel you can. If you feel too angry or disappointed, tell the addict, I can't be around right now. We'll talk soon. If you can hang out with him or her without analyzing everything, go for it. But if you cannot, excuse yourself and get distance. After the dust settles and you feel clearer, you can go over it. Analyze how you feel and what the factors were that you could learn from, and search for the departure point. Once recovery supporters' emotions calm down, they can help you address it or tell you how they feel. Once you're back to semi-normal, see if your counselor or sponsor can advise you. Until then, everything said is pretty much in one ear, out the other. Post-relapse. What do we do when the dust has settled? Get back on track. Get clean. Commit to the program. Analyze the issues again. See what worked and what didn't, and make adjustments. It's tempting to go back and try to reinvent the wheel when you feel it has fallen off, but the sensible thing to do is put the darn wheel back on and get back on the road. By now, you have a plan, program, and strategies, so return to them. Addiction is progressive, and so is recovery. It needs to evolve too. Relapse is often a part of the process. Evaluate your strategies to be sure they are the best ones for you and you still have confidence in them. Reevaluate with your counselor, sponsor, support team, or family members. Modify the components that need to be tightened or loosened. Examine strategies to see if any components need to be eliminated or new ones added. The departure point. There is a moment when we depart from our commitment to remain abstinent and decide to use instead. It is vital to realize this exact moment, or as close to it as possible, where we departed from staying clean. The most common perspective of the departure point is one of an either turbulent event or an unforeseen opportunity. I was doing great until my friend Sam offered me a hit. Next thing I knew, I took it and it was on. At that point, I crossed the line and just didn't even try. Or, I was doing great when my boyfriend started harping all over me for something stupid. We had a big fight and it really upset me. And the very next thing was, my mom started in on me too. I felt weak and angry and just wanted to all go away, so I used to escape and cope. Very mature and honest insights and accountability. However, now my input. You've known your boyfriend a long time, and Sam the friend and mom too. And there's at least some subtle awareness that trouble is brewing before it gets full blown, and you didn't escape or avoid these circumstances before they got big. Why? Your addicted mind will argue that you couldn't see them coming and you were caught off guard. I say your addict mind saw it coming well in advance, and in a subtle and even secretive way, it led you into the lion's den, knowing what your go-to coping strategy would be. Let's go back in time over the last few days and investigate. By reliving the highlights of the last few days or even week or two, we always find some subtle shift in consciousness, and we can locate the actual moment that the addict mind, the subconscious mind, made this decision and began looking or even helped create these proper relapse circumstances. Nearly every conflict and argument is avoidable if we are thinking clearly and maturely, but our thinking is often regulated and influenced by the relapse agenda. It plans and plots in advance, slowly creating or participating in circumstances that will lead us to be able to rationalize one of them as a weak moment. Now we're justified in our lapse. It could happen to anyone. No, it couldn't have, only to a dope fiend. When analyzing a relapse or relapse moment, look well before the actual incident. Look for the clues that reveal the actual departure moment, which is well before the actual using incident. Unless you woke up from a dead sleep and someone was offering or administering drugs to you, you had some participation in the circumstances that led to your lapse. Only then will we ever be able to use this knowledge to prevent a lapse in the future. The addictive subconscious is deceptive, clever, and always thinking 4 to 5 steps ahead. Get to know it, and get to know it well, because it sure knows you. How many relapses? It's hard to say how many relapses is the magic number that determines if we should go to the next, more intense strategy, program, or form of treatment. It varies from person to person. I recommend going through every outpatient paradigm and strategy at least once, probably 3 or 4 times, tightening the bolts and screws to try to get more clean time around each time. If an addict begs to go to rehab during the abstinence phase, I often recommend against it. Too often it's a cop-out, a desperate need to avoid the very hard work they haven't done yet, and a grasp at the illusion of an instant fix idea. They need to earn residential if they want it. Don't support or allow someone to go to rehab during or immediately after a lapse or relapse. The feelings, thoughts, and opinions they have at those moments are impulsive and unreliable. Wait a few days to see if they're still committed. Of course, as with all recovery, we have to explore the contradictions. There are those times when someone begs to go and you jump at it, no matter how messed up they are in the moment. But that's usually when we've been trying to convince them to go already and they've repeatedly refused. There are those addicts that I see right away need to get on meds, go to rehab, or need to be locked in a room. However, this takes professional acumen and experience. What I can evaluate in a few minutes is going to be much more accurate than most people who lack the benefit of dozens, hundreds of cases as a point of reference. Relapse revisited. Make a plan. If you use again, you'll have to go on lockdown for 2 weeks to keep you safe. Or if you use again, you'll have to stop hanging out with Brenda, because that's twice you relapsed with her. Or if you use again, you'll have to go to a 2-week recovery retreat, rehab, 3 meetings a week, etc. The options are many, but you should make a plan and discuss together what the next progressive stages are, so there is no ambiguity or misunderstandings. Work together and make a contract for relapse consequences before relapse occurs. If it never occurs, it was a mild waste of time. The contract should address not just one relapse, but the possibility of 2, 3, or even more. If one occurs, addict and recovery supporter should both know what the result is to be. If the second one occurs, everyone should know what that result is. Discuss and agree on the consequences far prior to an episode while everyone is rational and not reeling from an episode. Take relapse in stride. Everyone should be in this for the long haul, not the short one. It cannot be looked upon as failed recovery. It needs to be viewed as delayed or interrupted recovery. Hope, confidence, effort, and commitment are critical.